It sounds obvious. Somewhere inside you there must be a solid, continuous you. The same person who woke up this morning. The same person who existed 10 years ago. The same I looking out through your eyes right now. But Buddhism says that when we actually look for this self, we can't find it. And strangely, modern neuroscience has begun to uncover something remarkably similar. In this video, we'll examine Anatta, the Buddhist doctrine of no self, and ask whether the person we experience as I might actually be a construction created by the brain. Later we'll see why losing the idea of a permanent self doesn't necessarily mean losing ourselves at all. Physics, Consciousness and Reality, Dicky and Nigel Adams. And this is part 56 in the video series. It's the last part in chapter 8, Framing Foundations and Foundations of Eastern Approaches. So now today we're on section 53, No Self, Anatta, and the Fragile Self. Few ideas are more unsettling than the Buddhist doctrine of Anatta, no self. On the surface, it seems to deny the most obvious thing of all, that we exist as individual enduring beings. We each have names, histories, personalities, bodies and minds. Surely that is proof enough of a self. But Buddhism pushes us to look more closely. What we call I is not a single essence, but a bundle of processes stitched together by memory and narrative. Classical Buddhist teaching describes the self as nothing more than 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. None of these on their own is the self, and none of them endures unchanged. They arise, interact, and fall away moment by moment. The illusion of a continuous I is created in the same way that a flame seems steady, though in reality it is a constant process of burning. Modern neuroscience has started to echo this. Experiments with split brain patients show that consciousness can fracture. The left hemisphere can be unaware of what the right hemisphere perceives, yet both generate behaviours. We talked about that earlier, section 17. Who then is the real self? Brain imaging also shows that the default mode network, the set of brain regions most tied to self-referential thought, becomes quiet during meditation, psychedelics, or moments of deep focus. When this happens, people often report a loss of ego, a sense of unity with their surroundings, or a dissolution of the boundary between self and world. Neuroscience doesn't prove Buddhism right, but it reveals just how malleable and fragile our sense of I really is. The philosopher Thomas Metzinger goes further, arguing that the self is a kind of useful hallucination. Our brains generate a model of body and the world and then place a fictitious subject at the centre. This subject feels real, but is no more fundamental than the little pilot in a video game cockpit. It is a construct, not an essence. Interface theory from evolutionary psychology points in the same direction. Just as perception delivers simplified icons, the desktop folder that hides the real electronics, so too the self is an icon. Believing in a coherent, continuous I helps an organism survive. It allows long-term planning, social reputation, and the defence of a physical body. But like every icon, it hides the complexity beneath. Mistaking the icon for reality leads to confusion and suffering. This is the very point Buddhism draws our attention to. The craving to preserve and defend the self, as if it were solid, leads to endless dissatisfaction. We strive to build up this fragile construct with possessions, achievements, relationships, status, etc. But the self is never satisfied because it is never stable. To realise anatta is to see through the illusion and release that clinging. In doing so, suffering is lessened because one stops fighting to protect what has never really been there. This is not to say the self is useless. Like all icons, it has instrumental value. You need a self to cross the street safely or to show up at a party, but recognising its fragility shifts perspective. The self is a tool, not a truth, a story we tell ourselves, not the bedrock of existence. Seen from this angle, Buddhist philosophy and modern science are not in opposition, but in resonance. Both expose the I as fragile, constructed and contingent. Both invite us to consider that what we hold most dear, our sense of self, is not fundamental reality, but a convenient fiction, and both suggest a radical freedom in this recognition. If the self is only a story, then we are free to let the story go. So anatta doesn't mean that you don't exist. It means that the permanent, independent, unchanging self we instinctively imagine may never have existed in the first place. And what we call I may instead be an ongoing process, body, memory, perception, consciousness, and a narrative continually assembling something that feels solid. Perhaps that is precisely why the self can change so dramatically, and why our desperate attempts to protect and preserve it can create so much suffering. This brings us to the end of chapter 8, where we've explored Eastern philosophy, Maya, impermanence, finally the Buddhist challenge to the self itself. And we'll also have a summary in a second. In the next video, we begin chapter 9, relational reality and systems thinking. And we start with Nagarjuna and an even stranger possibility. Perhaps it isn't just the self that lacks an independent essence. Perhaps nothing exists entirely by itself. Next, then, is section Emptiness and Relational Reality, Nagarjuna's critique of essence. But first, a short summary of chapter 8. So, this chapter examined how Indian and Chinese traditions have framed reality in ways that differ from Western metaphysics. We encountered the Hindu vision of unity between Atman and Brahman, the Buddhist insight of impermanence and no-self, and the Taoist understanding of harmony and the natural flow. These perspectives do not treat philosophy as detached speculation, but as lived practice, uniting ethics, meditation and cosmology into a single vision. They remind us that insight is not only conceptual but also embodied, arising through discipline, ritual and direct experience. A recurring theme is relationality. The Upanishads describe the self as inseparable from the ground of being. Buddhism insists that all phenomena arise in dependence upon conditions. Taoism reveals the interplay of yin and yang as the rhythm of existence. These teachings converge on the view that isolation is an illusion. To understand the part, we must see the whole. This prepares the ground for the next chapter. Chapter 9 develops the idea of relational reality in conversation with systems thinking, exploring how modern science and philosophy increasingly mirror insights long present in Eastern traditions. The focus shifts to interconnection, networks and the dynamics of the whole, drawing parallels between ancient wisdom and contemporary theory.